All right, so we'll go ahead and get started. My name is Olutayo Segundo. I am the founder of the Do Influence. And today we have a really special presentation for you all. We have Miss Katie Carter, who's going to be presenting to us our interviews webinar. She's going to give us some really great tips. I've known Katie for some time now. Not only do we work together, we're friends, but she's excellent. And this is going to be really helpful for all you people looking for either new jobs, looking to interview for schools, looking to get into, academic or career professional programs, whatever it is. There's some really great interview skills. I've already used some of them. So thanks, Katie. All right. So just a few things to get out of the way. So we have a few requests for you all. If you can mute yourself on the Zoom, as well as make sure that your name appears. So that way we can see you if you have any questions or anything like that. And then if possible, please silence phones and music. And last but not least, be ready to participate. We're going to have fun. We're going to learn a lot, and I think it's going to be great. So yeah, that's the main thing. All right, guys, can you guys see my screen okay? All right, great. So I'm going to turn it over to Miss Katie Carter.
Hi, my name is Katie. I work with Dr. Sangunro, and we've known each other for quite some time now. And today I'm going to be doing a webinar on interviews, interview skills, how to prepare for it, and how to actually do an interview. So today the goals and the key points of today's webinar is, first off, how to obtain an interview, planning and preparation for an upcoming interview, building rapport before, during, and after the interview, helping you kind of guide the conversation and guiding the interview and how to take it in stride during the interview, and kind of optimizing your time during the interview to both benefit you and the employer or the academic academy that you're applying for. So we'll go on to our next screen. These are just the goal and key points. We'll go on to the next slide. And this will be our first poll question of the evening. And I just want to kind of know what brings everybody to this webinar today. Are you thinking of applying for a job and getting an interview? So the first poll question, just kind of get an idea of what brought you to the webinar today. And I think there should be some poll questions that pop up. There they are. Okay. So some of the reasons why people might be here today: are you applying for a new job or a job opening? Are you applying to a college, graduate degree, or an academic program? I already have a job and I'm looking for a promotion or a transfer within the job, or just other. Are you just curious and just want to get these skills under your belt before the time comes? So I'll give everybody a few minutes just to answer.
All right, I think we've got those poll results in.
Okay, perfect. Oh, good. So we have a little bit of mix of everything. Some people are applying for new jobs, applying for school. They already have a job, and others. So I'm glad everybody's here. This is wonderful because I have tips and tricks for everybody in here. So, and overall job interviews, are the same thing. You're just looking for the best fit for whether it's a program or a job. And how to go about a job interview or a college interview might be slightly different, but the objective goal at the end of the day is just to find the right fit position for you. So we'll go on to the next slide. Okay, perfect. I'm just gonna exit this. So what is the purpose, intent of the interview? A lot of you said we're going for new jobs, or job opening. Some people are applying for college graduate programs or academic placements. Some people are applying for promotions within a job they already have. So I don't know if anybody here is here to apply for a job because of a special skills task or a team. That's a little specific, that job interview, but I'll give you an example of what a special skills task and team is. It might be like a consulting interview, which the applicant is usually brought in for a very specific problem or a business scenario. and they must investigate and propose a solution. So for instance, people get hired for special skill task and team for interviews for strategy consulting, helping make business models, or helping companies enter into a new market. I know a lot of hospitals, I work in medicine along with Dr. Sangunro, a lot of medicine is turning towards telemedicine. So they're interviewing a lot of people who have special skills tasks in converting traditional medicine into telemedicine, but there are far more markets that need to be interviewed for. There's also special skills tasks in interviews called operational consulting, which companies hire specialists that help kind of optimize their processes, their procedures, cost cutting, reducing waste. So usually with those interviews, you're hired for one specific problem or interviewed for one specific problem, and you kind of share and propose your ideas, and that's the interview. The next type of interview is a merger or acquisition of a company. In some cases, companies are bought out or purchased by larger or brother sister companies. And so oftentimes within that company, they hold interviews to see which jobs they want to retain or if they want to restructure departments. So that's another type of interview you might run into in the future. And lastly, if you want to participate in a job transfer, if you're already in a company, but you would like to change either locations or departments, that's another type of interview that people often partake in during the course of their career. However, today we'll be mostly focusing on new jobs, new job openings, and academic placements or promotions. Okay. This is next poll question. How many of our participants have gone to an interview before, whether it be for jobs, academics, or others? I'll give everybody a minute or two to answer.
All right, those are the poll results.
Perfect. So it's wonderful. We have a mix of people who have experience from interviews and don't, and are just looking for more. So we'll go over some of the difficulties and some of the challenges, some of the things that you are good in during interviews. And for those who have not gone through interviews, we're going to go over everything that could be potentially challenging or things you should prepare for. So, oh, that's wonderful. We have a nice mix here. So these are the types of interviews that people typically partake in. We have the traditional interview, which is what you think when you sit down face to face with either a hiring manager or an employee. And those are usually one-on-one at the company. And that's what you think of when you think of the traditional interview. Given the COVID pandemic and given our recent shift in social distancing, we've been seeing a lot more now phone, Zoom, and video interviews, which might be a challenge for people. They're becoming a lot more common, but sometimes it's difficult to communicate and show those nonverbal and those emotional skill sets that somebody may have. But phone interviews, Zoom interviews, video interviews, anything along those lines, digital interviews are becoming much more popular, especially during this time. So we'll go over those as well. And consulting and case interviews, those are usually when there are two professionals looking to hire somebody temporarily, or somebody who already has a coexisting business and they just want to hire their services. So usually that's a little less formal of an interview. We also have group interviews, which is a type of interview in which multiple people are come together, and the employer will either do it face to face, Zoom, over the phone. You don't necessarily all the people are applying for the same job in a group interview, but it just might be the culture of the company to interview multiple positions, multiple applicants at the same time. And the last type of interview that we're going to go over is called a working interview. Working interviews typically happen after what we call a formal interview or a traditional interview, whatever format they may be. Could it be face-to-face or over the phone, Zoom? But a working interview is to really help both the employer and the applicant get hands-on training and to see, are they really a fit for this job? So if you get hired, under the condition that you are going to do a working interview too, to make sure you can handle the skill set of a job. Working interviews typically have you come in for a designated amount of time and see how you fit in with the group, see how you do hands-on with the job. And the employer or the hiring manager will see how you are and see how you fit. And it's also a good experience for you to see, is this job right for me? So working interviews, like I said, traditionally happen after your formal interview to make sure that you have the skill set and so on and so forth to go on for the job. Usually these working interviews happen with more hands-on or skill set jobs such as medicine or somebody who works in engineering. So those are the types of interviews we'll be going over today. Okay, so here are some of the resources that I have found and I've used in the past for interview preparation. Um, most of these, all of these have free services and most of these have paid services too. So you can use these at your discretion, but we'll go over the first resource, which is a website called Gainlow. Gainlow is a website that provides interviews primarily focused in the tech company and business aspect of interviews. They represent companies like Google, Facebook, Amazon, LinkedIn, Microsoft, all those big names. And what you can do is you can go onto this website, Ganlow, and you can register and you can participate in mock trials with people that are actually current employees at these major firms and major businesses. Now, the interviews that you undergo with them are completely confidential, completely private. The people that you do the mock interviews with have no influence on hiring. It's just for practice. So they can give you, good feedback and critical feedback that will stay private. So it's a good opportunity for you to get some insight, especially if you have a particular company or a business that you want to go into. You can help ask questions and see what the type of company culture is. So that's a great website. And you can do as many mock interviews as you would like with as many companies as you would like. And like I say, everything stays private. They also have weekly blogs and emails and things that you can sign up for that have tips and tricks for interviews. So it's a great resource to use, particularly if you have a specific job or a specific company that you want to go in for. You can see if there's anybody at the company who's affiliated with Ganlow who might be able to assist you in making your interview for that specific company or business model stand out. Our next resource is LinkedIn, which I know a lot of people have LinkedIn accounts, but LinkedIn Premier account is an additional account that you either pay or get limited services from. LinkedIn Premium account offers practice questions, and they have forums to discuss, job openings in the area, and they have people that are on forums that you can learn about a company that you're interviewing with at any time. So if you were interested, let's say, in working for a specific hospital or a specific business or firm, and you wanted to know more about them before applying, LinkedIn would be a great source. People who have worked there previously, currently, or are looking to work there, there's connections online between LinkedIn Premium accounts, and they could help you gain connections with a company you're interested in. And like I said, they also have practice questions and resources you can research your interviewer and learn the company. So you can say, is this a company a good fit for me? Should I apply here? And if you decide that that is a good company to apply there for, you've already made connections on LinkedIn to help maybe guide you and give you a one-up during the application process. The next resource that I found very helpful was Ambition Box. Ambition Box is more of a forum, and it is completely independently run. So it's not affiliated with any specific company or overhead or oversaw by any company, but you can research company reviews, salaries, specific questions. So when you're going in, when you already have a job interview, you can look up the company or the business that you're applying for, see what other people have been asked in interviews before, see if there's any interviewing questions that you would like to ask, see what people have asked before. They also give you an idea of previous people's salary offers, what they're currently getting. It's all anonymous. So you have an idea of what you're getting into. Is this a fair job offer? Vice versa. And you can also search schools on here, academic programs. They're all listed on there as well. So it's not just necessarily for jobs. There's also many practice questions and tips based upon your profession that you are intending to apply for. So within Ambition Box, they have a medical forum, they have a business forum, engineering, so on and so forth. So it's really guided towards the field that you want to go into. And even when I was looking at it, I was like, there are some really good questions on here that I don't think I even asked during my interviews. And if I were to go back and interview now, these would be something that I would definitely bring up. So Ambition Box is a website most certainly looking into it, particularly after you have a job interview set up with a company. So we'll go, I think I have one more resource, two more resources. The next resource is called The Preppery. Now, this is a paid service who guarantees money back if you're not satisfied, but if it's somebody, if it's a job that you're really taking seriously and you have the means to pay for this service will prepare you from start to finish for an upcoming interview. They will build your resume, portfolio, help you build references specifically towards this job interview. They'll also assist if you don't even have an interview set up and you don't even know what kind of job interview you want to go for. They'll even assist you with job searching, building a job portfolio, and helping you apply to the jobs that you want to. And also they do mock interviewing. So they have a lot of interviewing building skills. You'll be assigned a one-on-one preppery professional who will help you set up for this. So if you want to go in, this is something you're interested in, it's a very good service, and they can prepare you from job searches from beginning to end. Now, they don't do academics, so this resource would only be applicable to those applying for a new job or a new field. They don't help with getting into an academic program or a specific school. And then the next resource is Udemy. Udemy is an open online forum that focuses on all professional adults and students. They provide, it's basically a course forum. So they provide both paid and free courses online. And it deals with a multitude of professional adult student needs. So they have a whole forum on job interviewing, job skills, things of that, and even interviewing skill training. I put a link at the bottom for a video that goes over job interviewing skills. It's a training course. It's a free course. It's about an hour and a half long. So I would highly recommend watching it on your own spare time. It's broken up so you can watch it in pieces, but it does give you very decent feedback and very decent plethora of skills and tips and everything going into a job interview and everything. I'll basically sum up a lot of what's in the video, but if you want to watch on your own time, it's definitely a video I would highly recommend. So like I said, the link is down below, and the website for that is Udemy. Okay, so we'll start with probably a question that a lot of you have, how to get a job interview, which might be a very stressful, which is probably one of the most stressful times during the interview process. So to get an interview, we'll go over some of the tips and tricks that I'll recommend just to even apply. So first, let's say you find the interview. You find the company you would like to work for, the academic program you're interested in. I always highly recommend to make contact with that company, manager, recruiter, representative in some way, shape, or form. Let them know, reach out to them either via email, phone, face to face. I highly recommend just finding one person to speak to so you don't speak to a multitude of people. Find out who that specific person is that would be arranging for an interview for whatever program or job you're applying for. And let it be known to them, I'm interested in this job. Some people apply to multitudes of jobs in batches or multitudes of schools in batches. So to let this company or program know, listen, I'm very interested in you and you alone, it can make a great deal in even just getting an interview. So let them know your interest and, like I said, email, phone, face to face, those are all good opportunities of making contact and making your interest known. Um, the next tip I have for you might need to know you're interested in a specific job or field early on, but if there's any opportunities for job shadowing or volunteering, anything to get involved with a company or business that you want to be affiliated with, I highly recommend you getting involved with them in the future. Now, most times these are unpaid opportunities, but it helps develop a positive rapport, connection with the industry, and really showcase your assets with this team. And it really helps them put a face to the name. So once you're connected with this company, your ability to get a job interview is significantly higher. So for instance, if you want to go into medicine, if there's an opportunity for an internship or shadowing a physician or a nurse or whatever field you want to go into, I would highly recommend it. But like I said, this does take some time beforehand before the interview process. So if you know 6 months, a year out from you graduating or you going to a certain program that this is what I want to do, I would recommend reaching out to that business, that hospital, whomever it may be, and just seeing if there's any job shadowing or volunteer opportunities at that time. And that's always been a wonderful thing. And let's say you do a job shadowing or volunteering work, and you find out that this job or this company isn't the right fit for you. That might also be something, or you might go there and say, this is where I want to work and this is perfect. It really helps you make that connection and be very decisive with your job interviews in the near future. The next thing you would need to do to get a job interview is we need to send a cover letter, personal statement, or even a professional photo to make the application appear more personable and allow the employer to make an connection with that application. Um, so I would highly recommend that when you send your resume, please send the cover letter. Personal statement is a statement that's written by yourself, and it just highlights personal goals that you may have, a little bit about yourself. And in some cases, even a professional photo might be appropriate. So, and that might have, like I said, that might make the application appear more personable and make it stand out from the rest. And another tip that I have is make your application specific. So a lot of times people make up a general resume and they'll just send out that same resume to the 5 companies. But what I would recommend doing is making each application specific for each job. So if you're applying to a company, I would highly recommend you go online, you research this company, and you specify that one application for that one company. Um, Oftentimes companies on their websites will have something like a personal statement or a company statement. And that kind of highlights what their business model is, what their goal is as a company. And you can highlight your assets that might reflect their professional or personal statement. And, do research on companies, learn what's called the company culture. So see what they stand for, see what you can specifically bring for this company, and you can really highlight some of your assets specifically for each one of these resumes. It might just be small changes in each resume, but particularly making it personable might make the employer view your resume a little more seriously if they see you took the time and effort into making that resume personalized for that one particular job and not just a standardized resume. And lastly, once you apply for the resume, I highly recommend following up with personal contact once the resume or application has been completed. When you initially apply or submit your resume, um, I would ask if there is a application deadline, and sometimes there is, sometimes there isn't. If you're lucky enough to get an application deadline, I would say the appropriate follow-up after the application deadline would be about 1 to 2 weeks after the deadline to reach out and just follow up with the person of contact, whether it be a hiring manager or the company, to see if they're in the process of still looking through the resumes or have they already set up a job interview, and they should let you know. But like I said, it's usually a week or two would be appropriate follow-up. Go to our next poll question. All right. So what do you anticipate being the biggest challenge of the interview process? Now, like some of you have already gone through job interviews, so you might have some personal experience of that, but for those who haven't, what do you feel that would be the biggest challenge for you? Okay. All right, so we have obtaining the interview, okay, preparing, finding the position, and personal performance during the interview got the most. Okay, we're going to go over all of those, but I just like to see what people are thinking. I know all these can be challenging, so there's no right answer. So we'll go over all of these. Okay. So we'll go over the first challenging aspect of the interview. It's the preparation and planning for an interview. Now, like I said before, I highly recommend researching the company and the job that you intend to apply for. You can go to the company website, and you can see if you know anybody who currently or works in this business or holds a similar position. Ask them what they think of surrounding companies, what they think, and get some ideas from them. And then, like I said, lastly, grasping the company culture environment. So making sure the companies and the businesses you're applying for or an academic program is a right fit for you. Whether that be what their business model is, what their ethics and their, code of conduct is. Just make sure that when you're applying for these companies, that you feel like you yourself, as well as the company, can benefit from what their company culture is. And the next question is, what should I wear? So one of the tips and tricks that I've used in the past, working in medicine and being a nurse, it's challenging because typically in medicine and fields, everybody wears uniforms, everywhere wears scrubs. So what do you wear to a job interview? Because what I wear to a job isn't necessarily what I'm going to be wearing to the interview. So try reaching out to a representative in the HR department, wherever the company may be, and having them forward you the objective guidelines of the dress code or the code of conduct currently at the company, so you can get a better idea of what their dress code is, so you know how to dress. So when you show up and the interviewer sees, oh wow, she's already dressed like we expect them to, it's quite impressive. If you're applying for a job that doesn't necessarily have a dress code and you're unsure of what to wear, our suggestion would be wearing formal dress that is comfortable. The key is being comfortable, but being formal and put together at the same time. wearing formal clothing sometimes can be uncomfortable and sometimes be ill-fitting. And people that are interviewing you can often pick up on subconscious and body language that you're uncomfortable. So make sure that, despite wearing formal clothing, make sure you're comfortable, make sure you are still feel like you're you. And don't try to overdo it, but do wear something that is formal if you can, if you're unsure. Now, also what I recommend is avoiding distractions during interviews, whether this being overwhelming perfume, overwhelming makeup, wearing objects that you typically fidget with. So whether it be a pair of earrings or a necklace or wearing your hair a certain way, even wearing a watch. I know wearing a watch is something that's considered formal, but if you're going to be sitting during the interview and checking the time and playing with it, I'd probably recommend that you don't wear it at that time, just so you can avoid fidgeting. And remember, wear things that are going to make you feel comfortable and make you feel confident. And dress codes aren't necessarily limitations. We still want you to be to express your individual appearance and your, how you are as an individual. Dress codes are often in place because there's either strict hygienic needs that need to be met or professional guidelines, but they aren't meant to limit your, to discourage your individual appearance. So just the key is be comfortable, be confident, pull together, and wear what's something that you feel you could best perform in during an interview. And lastly, preparing and planning for an interview, I would always recommend going over some mock interviews. And like before, I gave you those resources where mock interviews can be practiced. But if you have other students, colleagues, a mentor to do these mock interviews with, it's a great opportunity. You'll think of questions that you'll want to ask the employer or the program. They'll present you with challenging questions that you might not necessarily have the answers with right then and there, but you can prepare for it. I would try to avoid doing mock interviews with any family or friends, only because they'll typically, I don't think, challenge you enough in that sense. But if you have a family or friend that you are trust and willing to do mock interviews with, then by all means, go ahead and do that. But usually another student, a colleague, or a mentor is a wonderful person to do mock interviews with, or a teacher or a professional in that field already, such as a professor that you could do that with. It's a wonderful opportunity. It helps you prepare your questions, helps you be aware of your body and how to act during an interview. So if you have a chance to just do those, I would highly recommend it. Okay. So what to bring to an interview? We're first going to bring several copies of our resume, cover letters, personal statements, if we have business cards, list of references or even character references. If you have a portfolio or a work sample, let's say you're an artist and you have a portfolio, you can bring that. If you work in business and you have some prior business models or some business strategies that you came up with, those are examples, work examples and samples that you can bring. Always bring a notepad, a pen, and it would not be unusual to bring some talking points you can have written down and questions that you want to ask for the employer. So those are things, and those are typically at the end of the interview, but you can write those down and keep those on your pen and notepad, and those wouldn't be inappropriate. So we'll go to the next slide and go over each one of these. Okay. So during the interview, there are a lot of things that you need to be cognizant of, or you can't be cognizant of during the interview that the interviewee is going to pick up on. The first thing that they're going to pick up on is your intrapersonal skills. So let's see. Emotional intelligence is something that often the interviewee picks up on. Body language, nonverbal communication, how you maintain a two-way dialogue, how you communicate, how you can show off the knowledge you already know to get knowledge from the interviewer, And like I said, have your own questions ready. So we'll go over each of these in a little more detail on the next slide. Okay, so the first one is interpersonal skills and emotional intelligence. So oftentimes we're going to see if we can have effective communication, verbal communication during the interview. The employer will pick up on this. So we want to make our communication direct, straight to the point, and professional. With that said, we also want to appear to be personable as well. So we don't want to sound like a robot, but we want to make sure that when we're answering questions and when we're asked questions, we make sure to answer the question thoroughly, get straight to the point in a professional manner. We also want to be good listeners during an interview, be respectful, engage with the speaker. And one of the biggest key points is make it a point to listen to hear, not just to prepare a response. A lot of people go into the interview thinking, I know how I'm going to respond. This is my response. This is what I'm going to say. But you might be surprised on some of the questions and everything that they will be presenting you in an interview. So always make sure to actually hear the person interviewing you. Don't just be waiting for a response. And then the interviewer is going to be detecting your problem solving and decision making skills during the interview. They'll probably be asking you some questions to kind of assess those. Now, solving skills, oftentimes you want to give an example that you're adaptable, that you're flexible in situations, that you remain level-headed, whether it be at work or during school, and that you take initiative, you work well with team, you're resilient. And if you have an example of this, this is a wonderful time to bring it up in the interview. So give an example of a time that you were innovative and creative with your thinking. And also decision making. Decision making, the employer is trying to see if you have critical thinking skills. If you have an opportunity to give an example during the interview to highlight your problem solving skills and your decision making skills, the first thing you would do is define a problem that you've had in the past. Once you define that problem to the employer, tell the employer all the possible solutions that you thought of, the pros and cons that you weighed, show them the process that you used. And then lastly, how did you implement these ideas? And that'll give them the employer an idea of, not only do I'm aware of my decision-making skills, here's my example of this, here's my example of problem-solving skills. And to give an employee an example of that is something much more significant that'll stand out to them. And employers are also going to be looking for, are you assertive? Do you speak up for yourself? Do you have somebody, or if you need to speak up for somebody else? So think of examples in the past that you might have been assertive. And usually it's times when you've disagreed respectfully with somebody and offered your ideas and suggestions. The employer is looking for that honesty and looking for that transparency, that you haven't been able to, you don't get along with everybody, you don't agree with everybody at work, but how did you address it? And how did you address it in a respectful and professional manner? And how did you stand up for something you didn't necessarily agree for and come to a agreement on it using your problem solving skills, your decision making skills, and being assertive? So if you can come up with an example in the past that you've used all those and have come to a peaceful and respectful resolution of a problem, that would be something that I would highly suggest to recommend during an interview, because that skill set is something that all employers are looking for. Lastly, skills that people should have going into interview are negotiation skills and nonverbal communication. So negotiation skills is typically something you'll see more during a job transfer or during like an acquisition or a merger of a company. So if you want to go to a different department or transferring, that's when you usually typically negotiate, or even with a new job. Oftentimes new employees have a little room to negotiate a salary too. For an academic position or an academic program, there's usually no need to negotiate. But sometimes for jobs, negotiation skills is something you can highlight to your employer during your initial interview to make sure that you are assertive of yourself, you are aware of your self-worth, and so on and so forth. And we'll go over the nonverbal communication too. That's important in the on the next slide in this. We'll go over these quickly as well. This is, let me just get these in order. These are emotional intelligence. So these are some of the things that employers might pick up on during the interview. So self-awareness, and sorry, give me 1 second. Okay, self-awareness, empathy, motivation, self-regulation, and social skills. So the first example, self-awareness, would be to make sure that, oh, hold on, I read the wrong slide. Perfect. Being aware of your limitations, being aware of your weaknesses, and being aware of your strengths. Just knowing who you are as a person. And when you can show the employer that you are aware of yourself as a person, you might be able to better relate to them who you are. Empathy is a skill that you might not necessarily get the opportunity to emphasize in your interview, but empathy is a skill that it's a very good leadership quality. So if you get the chance to show somebody that I feel I can feel in somebody else's shoes or relate to somebody and somebody else, it's a great skill to highlight during an interview. Motivation is something that you could show during an interview. Like I said, you can tell an anecdote or a story about how you've been motivated and dedicated in the past. So when you have an opportunity to get a reference professionally to show how you're motivated and dedicated, whether that be from references can be from a prior employer or from a teacher. They can be anything from a religious affiliation, showing your dedication through them. You can get a character reference through, let's say you went to a personal trainer for 2 years. That personal trainer can attest to how motivated and dedicated you were. So it doesn't necessarily have to be professional references and professional character references that you need. You definitely need those. But in addition to that, I would highly recommend just showing your motivation all around as a person, because that would reflect you overall. Self-regulation and social skills. So social skills is something that we've been hearing a lot about during interviews. People finding challenging in this day and age of social media and increased screen time. People view social very different. So let it be known, like, you intend on making professional and personal relationships at this job or this school. Let it be known that you intend to be interacting with your colleagues and you look forward to building relationships beyond what the job role itself is. And you can always ask questions about the company, like, how do we participate in outside work events, outside school events? Show your interest that you want to be a part of this more than just a job or more than just an academic. Let them know that you want to put yourself into this wholly, and displaying your social skills, that you can be involved in more than just a job. So go to the next slide. Okay, and types of nonverbal communication, things we can focus on and just be a little bit more aware of: facial expressions, posture, positioning, hand gestures, eye contact. Nowadays, handshakes and touch or something is something that we won't be doing as much. Voice, loudness, tone, proxemics, which is like body space placement, closing, and just physiological responses. So be aware of blinking, sweating, leg crossing, fidgeting. So things like don't chew gum during an interview. Like I said before, don't check your watch, put your phone away. Don't wear nail polish, try not to wear nail polish or anything that you would necessarily pick on, and try to avoid things that would tempt you to pick at them and fidget at them. So things like hair or jewelry. So those are just little examples. And how to conclude an interview. This is your time for you to ask the employer any questions too. So ask specific questions that you want to ask about the company, about the job. You can ask questions like, why is this job open in the first place? Is this a new job position? Why did the last person leave this position? And you might get some interesting answers that might help you reflect on, is this job a good fit for me? And another important question is, what do you expect the candidate to accomplish in the first 6 months or the first year? You can get an idea of what their expectations are, and also get an idea is this realistic for me for something to achieve? And it can also highlight the fact that you have the intent of staying at a job for longer than 6 months, longer than a year, and putting that thought into an employer can be very important. You also want to ask, is there any training or educational opportunities when I am, and if I am hired for this job, to get an idea of what kind of training and educational opportunities you'll get is sometimes make or break for a lot of people for a job. And also ask them, what do you like most working about this company? What do you like the most? What's the one thing you would change about this company? And it kind of gives you a human response from the person interviewing you, and you can get an idea. What do they like about this job? Why do they feel so strongly about hiring for this company? And at the end of the interview, make sure to always thank the person interviewing you, and just restate your interest in the position and restate your interest in the company. And before you leave, it would not be inappropriate to ask, when do you expect to hear back from them regarding the next steps or the job position? So it's a question I typically get, and it's not inappropriate to ask that question. They'll give you an idea, and that way you can kind of gauge when you're going to follow up. And the next slide will be follow up. So after an interview, I always recommend to send a thank you note, whether that be via email or you can send a physical thank you note. And usually the etiquette for that is send a note 1 to 2 days after the interview is held. In that note, mention one specific thing in the interview that you walked away with, that you learned, that you appreciated, and always say that you look forward to hearing from them. So that way you keep an open loop for communication. Another type of follow-up is the update note or email. In a situation where you have applied to multiple jobs and you've already heard back from a job and you would like to take that job or accept that job offer or positioning or academic program, it's always in best practice in nature to send the other hiring managers who are still looking to hire you an update card saying, thank you so much for the opportunity to interview. However, I've taken a position at this other job. It really shows the other people that you've applied for your appreciation and your consideration. And if you are to apply to a job or another program in the near future, it'll show them that you are accountable for your actions and don't lead them on down a road where you could possibly be hired and wasted their time. So you can send that. That's called an update note, and that's always very courteous. And the last type of note you can send in the event that you didn't get an offer, and this might be a difficult note or follow-up to send, it would not be inappropriate to send them a follow-up email, a letter, or something saying, thank you so much for the opportunity. And I understand you went with other candidate or other positioning. Ask for feedback ask for constructive feedback in the interview. It can be beneficial. Say, I would love for you to share your thoughts on me as a candidate. Where do you think what characteristics do you like? What characteristics do you think I should work on? It'll show the employer that you are self-aware and you're aware of your strengths and weaknesses. It could even identify that, listen, you're a wonderful candidate, but this job's not the best match for you. And most importantly, it's going to display your willingness to build and grow as a young professional adult. And showing that and developing connections is very important. So it might be a difficult letter to write, but it's very, very constructive and very helpful, and might help get you jobs in the near future. And these are just some of the references that we've used. Most of them, any links or anything should be in there, and for the references and the guides before. So these are just some references. And I think that we're going to give some time for questions and answers if anybody has anything.
I have a question.
Yeah, of course.
Hi, my name's Chesley, and my first question is, when you were saying that you can contact like people in the position, like specifically on LinkedIn, is it okay? So I'm looking to be like an associate in a specific position, but I found the manager of the associates in the same department on LinkedIn. Would it be not good to contact them, or should I contact them?
So the resource that I gave you is called LinkedIn Premier. So you voluntarily joined that program. So with the intent of making connections for job interviews, for job transferring. If that LinkedIn itself is just a website that you can share your credentials and your resources, not necessarily that you would like to interact with that. If that individual is on LinkedIn Plus, or LinkedIn Premier, it's called, they are on that resource with the intention of making connections. So you can assume that it's safe to say that they would like to be reached out and communicated with. But LinkedIn itself, you can see if there's you want to be an associate, you can see if there's fellow associates on there, not necessarily the manager, to reach out for and say, listen, I'm interested in applying to a similar job for you. Do you have any resources, suggestions? And if they give you contact information for that manager and say, reach out to my manager, at least at that time you have a reference. You say, hi, my name is so-and-so. I've gotten your name from your current employee, Mr. or Mrs. this. I'm just letting you know I'm interested in getting hired for an associate's job. Would that, do you have any opportunities at this time? If not, please let me know in the near future.
And I have a second part to that question.
Of
I'm
course.
sorry. You said in the slide, you said do all of this prior. So I've been in the process of looking for jobs, and there are still some job positions that are still open. Is it okay for me after submitting my application to reach out?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You can reach out at any time. So like I said, you reach out before or after, but you can absolutely reach out after, and just say, hi, I placed my application a few weeks ago. I just want to introduce myself and let you know that I'm very interested in this position. And that would actually be a perfect time to ask them as well, did you get my resume? Is there a time frame for this? And those would be completely appropriate. So, and even if you want to follow up with saying, I sent my resume earlier, but I would also like to incorporate, if you had a personal statement or other, professional like references or something you wanted to send, you could also follow up with that. But it's not inappropriate to follow up after and introduce yourself after a resume is submitted. I would highly recommend that.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Katie. Any other questions? Let's make this open interactive. I just wanted to make a quick introduction, and I'm sorry that I did not do this earlier. We were having some technical difficulties, but under the window that says the Do Influence is Miss Alicia Garnett. She's our education coordinator, who, like we all tend to at some point with Zoom, having some technical difficulties. We've rehearsed this and gone over it. Yeah, and went over. We did a meeting with Katie on Sunday, and everything was good. But listen, technology happened. So I just wanted to introduce Alicia. So normally she would be speaking right now, but I'm jumping in with my headphones, as you can see here. So she's excited for everyone to be here today. So let's ask some more questions.
Catherine, first of all, I want to congratulate you on this presentation. You provided a lot of information and
Oh,
a
thank
great deal of
you.
knowledge. One of the questions that I have is in regards to the submission of your resume.
Mhm.
And it's a debate that, I'm trying to find out if you learned anything new. When your resume there's a deadline for the resume, there seems to be a lot of confusion as to what that deadline means. So if it's due January 22nd, is it January 22nd, 5 p.m., or is it January 22nd, 12 p.m.?
So
I sit on a lot of search committees, and I think it's really important for people to know what we're asking for when we say the deadline is this day.
I think that's a very good question. If there's any question or concern with a specific deadline, I would recommend just reaching out. It's probably going to be the end of the business day, but you don't want to assume either. So I would just reach out and say, if my application goes in the morning or evening, is that going to make a difference? Always prepare ahead of time, because you don't want to find out that just because of a logistical issue of timing, your resume didn't get reviewed. But I would always think it would be at the end of the business day that it would be accepted.
Yes.
But depending on who you're applying for and the specifics of that. And I would say I would just ask who will be reviewing these resumes, because based upon, and then just ask them and say, and they might say, I'm in the office till 3:30, I'm accepting them till 3:30. So that's a very good question. I don't think there's one specific answer for that. So I think that would be individualized. But if you have any questions about that, I would recommend just going to the source and confirming. That way, if there's any issues with the resume, you can, it wouldn't be based upon timing.
What I see is that when the resumes are submitted, there's usually a timestamp on the resume, that those who are on the work that I do is on the search committee. And quite often after that timestamp, because you get so many applications, you get about 100 that you're trying to narrow it down. So in my experience, it's been, if they cannot meet the deadline, that already tells you a little bit something about the applicant, right?
Exactly.
Right. That you don't want someone who is,
waiting to the last minute.
Yeah. Sorry.
If you can, and that's a great point. If you can get your application in early and on time, and your application's cohesive, that itself can be an impression on somebody without even opening the resume itself.
Yes.
So that's something that, and I understand life happens and circumstance happen and things, can be dragged on. So it's not necessarily always a reflection of you, but if you have the capacity to send in an interview or send in a resume early and complete, that always is a great reflection of the person who is sending in that resume.
Okay.
Great questions. Miles,
that was
Christopher.
A very good question.
Yeah. Miles, Christopher, any questions? Not to pick on you guys.
Miles was in an interview today.
Yeah, as Mom just said, she's sitting right next to me. I had the opportunity to interview today, and I think
congratulations.
Right, thank you so much.
That's a huge deal.
Yeah, hopefully it all went well.
Well, knowing that you're here after an interview is a huge say on who you are. So I'm sure you did just fine.
Thank you. No, but I think definitely, I've had the blessing of being taught by Miss Tayo and my mom and everybody how to properly do it. And I'm just proud to know that, the information that they're giving me is the information I saw on the slides. So, they know what they're talking about. It made me very happy. And I think all the questions that I had, they've been answered through all this. So thank you so much for hosting this. But yeah.
Oh, you're very welcome. It seems like you have wonderful guidance and wonderful mentorship.
Yes, thank you.
So I would recommend just keep doing if you have any questions or concerns during this interview process. I know the interview itself is over, but it's still a process. So if there's any questions or concerns or things that is this normal? Is this how it happens? Please feel free. You can always reach out and just make sure. Interviews can be very stressful. The waiting process is very, very stressful.
Yes, it is.
But it's part of the process. But if you have any questions or concerns, and even after the interview is done, there's still, so please feel free to reach out if there's any questions or concerns, if there's anything
Definitely.
uneasy.
Katie, I really loved your presentation overall. Obviously, it's my second time hearing it, and I still love it. But one of the points, a lot of points that you gave were really great. But one of the things that I thought was really pointed and excellent is that whole preparing for the interview, right? So like that, like people have to do their homework, you know?
Yeah.
So knowing the dress code, that's something that you told me that I didn't even really think of in terms of calling, you know, the HR department or looking up their dress code online. So that's just a point that, yeah, that I want to hammer to everyone, that she actually taught me that, where, you know, I'll dress professional all the time. But one of the points that Katie made in a previous conversation of ours is that, you know, you might not dress the same to go into Google than you would to go into the hospital. You know, you might not dress the same for a Facebook interview and that you would for, you know, like a business job in a corporate building, right? So knowing the culture and knowing the dress code that those positions that you're looking for will literally make you fit in right from the bat. Just like we talked about, getting things in on time tells a lot about someone's character. Well, if you come dressed for the part, like you're halfway there, you know, so
they can already see you in that part.
Right. So I just wanted to reiterate that because I thought that was an absolutely awesome point.
Yeah, and Tyone, I think I could speak on your behalf and my behalf. We wear scrubs every day to work. But if I would have shown up to scrubs for my job interview at the time, you know, being a nursing student, this and that, they probably would have looked at me and said, no. So I had to learn how to dress for my first interview because I was so used to wearing scrubs, which is professional for that, you know, but not professional for the interview process. So I had to really learn and engage and really just observe what other people were wearing in the non-clinical setting of the hospital. You know, little things like, what kind of shoes do I wear? Am I allowed to wear shoes with this on it, this color? And, you know, I didn't, you know, it's just like observation. But the biggest thing was just calling HR and saying, you know, these are our rules. It's just mostly for hygiene and mostly for keeping you and the patient safe. And that's how I dressed. And, you know, everything. And I wear, you know, I dress professionally when I go to meetings and so on and so forth. But when I'm taking care of patients, it's always scrubs, which is professional in that setting, but not necessarily in an interview. So, and Tayo makes a wonderful point. Depending on what type of company or business you're going into, they might have a different culture. So in one place, they might allow, you know, jeans every day. And in another place, you might be a 3-piece suit you have to wear to work every day. It really depends on the company. But if there's any questions on how, you always reach out and just ask if they have a policy. And if they do, they will happily share it with you.
Catherine, I'd like to also applaud you on something that I seldom see when people are presenting on this, which is the perfume.
Oh, yeah.
Quite often, individuals will wear fragrance, not realizing that the person interview them could have allergies.
Of course.
Right. And so I was really delighted to see, you know, you identified that as something that you do not want to wear, right? To an interview, because that person there wants you out of their office so quickly because they cannot breathe, right? And
exactly.
It has, right. And so I really applaud you on that. One of the things that when I was younger, my mentor, her name was Winston Thompson. So when you think of the name Winston Thompson, you're expecting a male. And what she would do is she would switch places with her administrative assistant, and see how you're going to treat her. And that always stood in my head, because the administrative assistant then would come out of the bathroom, and then she would then announce, oh, this is the administrative assistant, I'm Winston, right? Right. And so I learned that, right? The other thing that I learned, my kids are gonna laugh and Ty is gonna laugh, is, sometimes you can be running a little late, right? And on the highway, your driving may be a little different because you're nervous. So I was always told that when you're within 3 exits away from when you're going to interview, you need to change your driving, because you may cut off the wrong person and maybe the individual.
And you may be holding open the door for the person interviewing you right after you cut them off.
And the parking space, right? Where
Yes.
we're like, oh, I need that space, right? So I share that with my students at 3 exits to start being polite and allowing people the way.
That is a wonderful tip. From the second you get into that car from the job interview, you should be appreciative of everybody, from the doorman of that building that from the receptionist, everybody, because you're going to be working with all of them, and that's a first impression.
Yeah.
And it's really key to just be kind and patient with everybody. I know you're under stress because you're going to a job interview. You might have a lot going on in your mind, but being kind and being polite to people and respectful of people goes a very long way. If
Because
you're
people are watching, people are always watching.
You're making your first impression. If you walk in right on time and you're nervous but you're still polite to that receptionist, she might make note, this lady's very polite to me. I'm gonna walk her upstairs and show her where to go to save some time. I'll take her up this way. This might save her a few minutes. And really, you're not looking for any favors to be in return, but if you make that conscious effort to be polite all the time and be respectful, people are going to want to give that back to you in return. Don't expect it, but a lot of people will want to. So that's a very, very good point.
100%.
Yes.
Just to piggyback on that real quick, and I think Chelsea has a question for us too. Just to piggyback on that, is that don't think that the person that you're there to interview, like the boss or the manager, is the only person interviewing you. You are far from reality if you think that's the case. Everyone is watching you, and oftentimes we take input from people. So for example, with residencies and, in medicine, right? If we really like someone, we only saw them for that 30 minutes, but they were waiting in the waiting room for 20 minutes. There was a post part that they were for another 15 minutes. So we ask those different people. If someone comes up to us and say, hey, we really have reservations about that person, even though our small time that we were with them was really great. If someone gives a really bad review, then you're done, right? Like you're not going to get that position or get that spot with us. So, you're always being watched. And in an interview that I did probably about a year or so ago, I think one of the things that really helped me was the secretary and I became friends, right? Because we were so behind on interviews. And so literally the secretary and I were talking for literally a good 20 minutes or so. So some of the things that I got back in my feedback from that position, which I did get, were things that I did not say to those interviewers. I said to the secretary. I know that for a fact, because I would not have said it to the interviewer, right? Like talking about my hobbies and stuff I do for fun. Though I didn't say that during the actual interview, but I did say it to the secretary. So that's how I know that information gets fed back, because some of those things, like I said, I didn't say directly. So always be nice.
That's a wonderful point. Wonderful point.
My question was, I recently had a panel interview over Zoom, and that was really difficult. But I had a whole cheat sheet ready of different departments, who was in the departments, who was high up, who was the manager, who was the administrative assistant. And when I got to the interview, they never asked me any questions to utilize that knowledge. And it kind of just threw me off, because I spent all that time to find all that information, and it wasn't asked. Am I supposed to bring it up, or I guess is my question.
That's interesting. So you had a panel interview, you had an individual interview, and they were the ones with the panel, correct? They weren't interviewing multiple candidates?
No, it was just me, and then in the Zoom call, it was like 6 other people, and they were all interviewing me. But, yeah.
Oh, okay. And what type of questions did they ask you? That were you surprised by anything, or was it?
I think the one that caught me off guard the most was, tell us something about you that wouldn't be included in your resume or cover letter. And I write my cover letters very extensively, and I say like all of my accomplishments. And then for someone to ask me, well, what didn't you put on your cover letter? I'm like, oh, I put everything that I could fit on that cover letter.
So that is a good point. A lot of employees use that as a question. And I have a tip for that. It's called the 1/3 rule. So when an employee goes, tell me about yourself, remember the 1/3 rule. You're going to talk a third of your time about your past, a third of your time about the present, and a third of your time about the future. And in that, tell me about yourself, you want to, talk about, first you want to talk about your current self. Like, this is who I am. This is my current position. This is who I currently am. Give some background information about how you got there. So that covers your past. And then give an experience that is relevant to why you are why you're sitting in front of them today. And then something you hope, and then for your future, tell them, I really look forward to being with you because I think that, and then give them an example of something in the future that you want to accomplish with them. So tell me about yourself. And it typically doesn't necessarily have to be professional. It could be personal, but always use the past, present, and future so they understand that you have linear thinking about yourself. They want to just get an idea. Now, in terms of them asking you about who their cabinet's made out of, and who they might have anticipated that you've already known that, and so they won't ask that for you. You probably gave them the impression that, yeah, I think she knows these questions, so they didn't even bother asking them. But if they had any hesitation that you didn't do your research, those questions might have been posed to you. So that could be something beneficial, that they thought that you gave a strong interview and they didn't want to waste their time on questions that they thought that you looked like you already knew.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I didn't get the job, but
you'll be surprised. I'm telling you, you'll be surprised on the preparation alone. Even though you don't acknowledge that you prepared, it really shows during your interview without saying anything at all.
Absolutely, Katie. I echo that 100%. And Chesley, even though you didn't get the job, you were probably you were probably neck and neck with the person that they end up hiring if they did. One of the things to remember is that these interviewers a lot of times have a script. I do a lot of interviewing myself, and I have like my questions, right? I know what I want to ask. But if I've reviewed the candidate's resume, I've gone to their, professional site where they have their portfolio and things like that, and I'm like, I want that person, right? So basically, then the questions that I kind of had planned are going to go out the window. Then I'm going to ask things really about themselves. Alicia, I hope I can put you on the spot here for a second. But when I was looking for a coordinator for the Do Influence, I reviewed Alicia's application and her resume, and I actually responded to her and said, I'm sorry, you're too qualified for this job. And then she responded back to me, and she's just like, what do you mean? And I was just like, what do I say to her? Like, I don't, she's too qualified. And then, I said, well, let's have an interview, a phone conversation. So I've already reviewed everything about Alicia, and she's phenomenal. And so literally we're on having this conversation, and I'm pretty sure I didn't actually ask you any interview questions, because I already knew that I wanted, like, the fact that she wanted this position. So literally my questions were like about her, like, like, where do you live? Like, like about, almost personal questions, because that person was so qualified, and I already knew that I wanted that person, that those simple, like, what's your weakness? What's your greatness? I could already see that through her extensive resume and her, her statement and everything like that. So don't think of it as they didn't ask me the questions that I thought they would ask me. they may have already answered those questions through your application process, and you were just so qualified. So they just jumped to the, well, let's get to know her. And that's what it was with Alicia and I. I was like, let me get to know you. We were talking about her kids and her family. You know what I mean? Like it was, we were past those simple, interview questions, right? So don't think of it necessarily as a bad thing. Just think of it as like you were, like you were the bomb diggity, right? And they just wanted to know more about you. And just
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And just one more thing about that. So I love Katie's the 1/3 rule. The other thing I was just going to add to that is on people's resumes, a lot of things like additional concepts that they can add on there is something like the hobby section. So I recommend that you add that, or if you choose not to add it, mentally add it. So one of the things that may not be in your personal statement or in your, seen on your resume or anywhere else are things that you personally like to do. So most people on here probably know, but fun fact about me is I love to make candles, like from scratch. Like I get like wax and I mix fragrances and fragrance oils and I do that. And so that's not necessarily on my resume. I'm a surgeon by training. I'm a surgeon by profession. It's a weird thing, right? People are like, what's happening? Like, what's you doing with the candles? But it's a cool thing to talk about. So if someone says, tell me something about you that's not on your resume, I'll be like, well, I love fragrances and I love candles. They're like, what? Then I go over my whole spiel and then we just talk about it. We laugh about it. And then
That's such a good idea.
yeah. So have
and she really does make candles. I smelled them.
Yeah, right.
Well, because in my mind, I'm just thinking they only want to know about the professional stuff. But like a hobby of mine that I like to rock climb and boulder, and I never thought to bring that up.
Oh, absolutely. That's cool.
Oh my gosh.
Like even like right now, I want to ask you more about it. Do you
well, because like
motivation, dedication.
Right.
Another thing, for instance, for me in particular, in regards to that, is like in my cover letter, I lived in South Korea for 4 years. I was an ESL teacher, and I put that in my cover letter, and nobody ever seems to like want to elaborate or extend on that. And I'm just like, I'm giving you, and like, maybe I'm just in my brain, I'm just like, they don't want to hear about that. Like, so I'm just
no. They might
professional.
They might not have something directly to, to relate to with that. So say, you can start off as, I really like to travel. I'm a huge traveler and I got this opportunity to go to Korea, and then they could be like, oh, I love to travel too. And be like, oh, where have you traveled to? And start conversation. It may necessarily have been to Korea, but they might like to travel, and you can share like, oh, I've always wanted to go here. I'm interested in this. And you never know where a conversation. So something interesting like that, particularly when it relates to hobbies, feel free to bring it up, because you never know what follow-up questions, you never know who's interviewing you. Those are people at the other side of the table too, with interest, and you never know what you're going to make a connection with somebody ever. It could be something that you would never think would be interested in, and you could make a lifelong relationship with just a little connection. So bring up all that stuff, that rock climbing and everything. That is so interesting. If I were interviewing you and you brought that up, I would probably have a difficult time refocusing on the professional questions.
And that's what you'll get remembered by, right? So like I'm remembered as a candle lady. Not that I'm a surgeon and all that, but like, I'm the candle lady. Listen, I don't care how you remember me, but as long as you call me back for that position, we're good. Call me whatever you want, right? So like those interesting things, again, what you can do is you can write a couple things on your CV, but hold a few things back. So that way, like that rock climbing thing is a brand new thing that you're going to talk to them about during that. And like Katie said, they're going to be like, oh, well, tell me more about this. And they might even say to you like, well, how did you get involved in that? Why do you keep doing it? You might have answers, like, well, it's really exciting for me and I really love to push myself and I love challenging myself and, whatever it is. You're talking about rock climbing, but what I, as the interviewer here, I hear someone who's very hardworking. I hear someone who's dedicated. I hear someone who's going to push themselves against limits that they didn't know that they had, So you might think I'm just talking about rock climbing, but I'm listening through the words that you're saying,
Okay.
Tyler,
Sorry, I have more questions.
I agree with you on the comment that you made in regards to identifying something that's unique about yourself, because what ends up happening is we start to refer to you by that name, that uniqueness, right? And because you get over 100 applicants, right? And now you don't remember who's who, but what that unique piece we start to refer to the individual as, oh, that rock climber, right? That candle maker. And so I think the point that you are making, Chelsea, is really on point, that what is going to make you stand out from any other individual? You want to say that, and even if the questions aren't asked, find a way to incorporate it in your answer, right? I think, one of the things that I'm seeing right now is the length of some of these resumes, and people are forgetting that there's so many applicants who are applying. And so it's just like, okay, a 20-page resume, if everyone has 20 pages, we're not going to read it, right? And so I think it's really important that to recognize what positions that you're applying for and what to have, as Katie was saying, in the resume. But I think that unique quality, I know the last 3 interviews, I don't remember anyone's name, but I can tell you what they did, and that's how we referred to them during the interviews.
Yeah. And people forget there's another person at the other end reading that resume. Human connection is a very strong force that nobody can deny. So to make that human connection through a resume or through an interview, through any opportunity you have to make that, whether it be with your personal hobbies, if you can do that, that is something far beyond many skill sets of anybody, a lot of people who are going for interviews.
Thank you for that. Also, just in terms of my job search, so I have applied to, I think as of today, 36 jobs where I've written customized cover letters and had my resumes checked by people. But out of those 36 jobs, I've only secured 2 interviews, and both of those interviews I didn't go on to the next level, even though jobs I really am interested in getting, I reach out to the companies and all that stuff. And I'm just like, is that a common issue, a common thing with people, and that just maybe they're not hiring, or they chose someone else, or just 36 applications and only 2 callbacks is that extraordinary or normal, I guess?
It's, given the times that we're in right now, and given the shift of, the job force amongst a lot of businesses, we've been seeing that, it's a very saturated market right now for applicants, particularly students and things. So it depends on the field that you're in. There are fields that the jobs really haven't been touched much. And also you have to remember that a lot of these applications that you're applying for might not have been reviewed yet, because the people who are reviewing them might be working from home or might be furloughed. So there might be a delay on their end. It isn't necessarily that the job's not being hired, it might be on hold right now. And these companies and businesses find it difficult to relay and to communicate with each one of these applicants, because everybody's jobs kind of is on hold. So it doesn't necessarily mean you've only heard back from these 2. If you heard back from all 36 and 34 of them said you didn't get the job, then we could, that would be okay. Maybe we need to change our strategy. But there's a big chance that there's a delay in review of these resumes too. They might put these jobs on hold until, social distancing and COVID becomes a little more lenient. But they had the intention of hiring, but now all these resumes are just nothing's being done with them.
Okay, so it's if I was getting a lot more straight rejection letters instead of a lot of the jobs that I've applied for, even though I reached out to them, I never got anything back, but not even no, you've been rejected. And so I'm just is it me, or is it am I I don't know, I'm I've got a master's degree, I've traveled, I'm am I that unemployable?
If there's something as job specific, I would recommend just reaching out to them. They might have a simple answer like, oh, due to the restructuring of we're actually putting this job on hold. We're going to be looking for candidates in, March now instead, or in September instead, or actually we've taken down this job and we've reassigned it to here. you never know reaching out to them. It's not, or they could be like, that job's just not even being offered anymore. So it might not be you necessarily as a candidate. It might be something, there's a far more factors that could play into it. But to reach out to a company after you applied and just double check with them is something that it was never harmful to do.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you so much for this, very insightful presentation.
Oh, that you're very welcome.
I'd say probably like my
Everybody
favorite
else,
piece.
they arranged it.
My favorite part was the piece about, really building that relationship with your interviewer, because so many times you think that you want to, demonstrate your knowledge and your ability to do the job, but at the same time, hiring officers might be looking for who meshes the best and who has potential to kind of learn on the job over the very knowledgeable person, but kind of stuck in his own way. So I appreciated that, aspect of your presentation.
Oh yeah, and it's always, and during the interview, always feel like you have the right to ask the interviewee questions too, because this is your opportunity to gauge if this job is right for you too. And when you assert yourself and you ask those questions and you start asking the interviewer questions about themselves and stuff, it's like, oh, like they feel appreciated. They're like, they're asking me questions, and it really makes that connection. Like, what do you like about this job? How long have you been here for? Tell me what you like, what you dislike. It gives them the opportunity to feel like they connected with you rather than you just sitting there and giving them answers. So there's no, it's a great opportunity to, remember, you ask questions too, you make that interviewer feel like they're welcome in this interview too. And it really goes a long way. It's, I know interviews are very formal and they're very stressful, but the people that go in there with the anticipation, this is just two people talking, exchanging information and making a human connection. That's the best way to go in and look about it.
All right. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Yeah, really, really great comments and great presentation overall. The last two comments that I'll just close with from Alicia, just because we weren't able to hear her with the technical difficulties, but we were talking about the jobs and sometimes not hearing back from employers. So like over 300 or so people can apply to a job, and the employer really doesn't have time to read it all. In fact, there is some research that I've actually and I have a little video out there, which I may end up turning into a webinar, because it kind of follows this same process of professional development and helping us get the job. But a lot of times in medium-sized companies or larger, 80% of the resumes that are used to apply to a job don't get seen by human eyes. 80%. And then of that 80% that don't get seen, they pretty much get washed out. The 20%, it comes down to probably less than 5% of those people get interviews. So don't be discouraged, because you may just be in that 80%, which is still the majority of people who don't even get human eyes on their resume, so they probably won't even get a response. Right now, with a lot of jobs, a lot of people are applying, right? The job market with the jobs that are desirable are very desirable, right? And with even great education levels and things like that, a lot of people a lot of times are qualified for the same job and will want the same job. So it's important to always try and stand out, and keep pushing, don't stop. Alicia was telling us that she sent out over 125 resumes over the summer and the fall and really got any feedback from the employers. And like I told you before, Alicia is a very, very experienced person. I'm not saying it just because she's on here, like she's actually awesome. And she sent out over 125 resumes to different jobs over the summertime. You know what I mean? So just don't be disheartened, keep pushing forward, and know that it's kind of like a wild, wild west, wild world out there. You just got to figure out how to, tackle the game pretty well. So, are there any other questions from anybody else before we wrap up today? This was a great discussion. Okay, well, thank you all so very much. I put in the chat some resources. We have a professional development curriculum that is free on our website. If you go to thedoinfluence.com and click under education, we do have monthly webinars. Our next webinar will be February 24th, also a Wednesday at 5 p.m. And we will be talking about getting careers in the STEM field, science, technology, engineering, and math fields, by actually also one of my friends. Her name is Dr. Tashelle Green, and she is actually one of the national STEM coordinators for Johnson & Johnson on the national level. So she actually does STEM coordination nationally. So she'll be able to actually give some really good insight about preparing for these careers. She has a PhD in pharmacology and just is a really, really smart person. So I would love for you guys to join us for that as well. Miss Katie Carter, Mrs. Katie Carter,
Right.
Mrs. Katie Carter, absolutely. Thank you so much. This
Thank
was
you so much for having me.
Yes, absolutely. And yes, we will get you a copy of the information with all the links and everything in it. So we'll email that out to everyone that was participating today. We do have the attendance and your email addresses, so we will get that out to you. Again, thank you all so very much. If you guys have any questions in the meantime, feel free to email us at thedoinfluence@gmail.com. Also, make sure to find us on social media. We are on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn and YouTube. I'm like, what are the other social media things? We're all on all of them. So just look for us at The Do Influence. Okay. That's TheDuinfluence. All right, guys. Thank you so much and have a great night.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Catherine.